So hello there and welcome back to the channel. This is Mel's Gaming here with another Deer Hunter 2005 video, and we're starting off immediately with a clip of my first ever buck fight that I've seen in this game. This was such a cool thing to come across, two whitetail bucks actually fighting. I knew this could happen, but this was my first time actually seeing it. Really cool to come across while I was out here hunting. Just a fantastic experience. Now we're going to start off with an interesting trophy in this video. We actually have a half rack buck, and he's actually quite a big half rack as well. The one antler that he does have is pretty big. Now from what I understand, this is quite a rare thing to come across. Of all the deer I've seen, this is the first half rack I've come across. Now, just getting a little bit closer before I take a shot, he's kind of halfway through that fence, but we do actually manage to get a drop shot on this guy. Now, unfortunately, he is going to land on the side that has the antler, and it's kind of going to go into the ground. But just an interesting thing to actually come across. I really like that about this game, that there is so much variation with the deer that you can find. Obviously there's the typicals, there's non-typicals, then you can have the half racks, and that's not even talking about the behaviour, like seeing the fights and them making scrapes and all of those cool things that you can also see. Now this guy scores 0 because he is just a half rack, but just a cool thing to come across. Now moving on to the next deer, and we have my first record book whitetail buck out here. This was such a cool thing to see because at this point I'd only hunted the mule deer in this game, so I was really excited about coming out to find some big whitetail, and seeing this big record book buck out here was such a cool thing. He is absolutely massive. Now I get a shot on him there as he's walking by. I just could not get a fantastic shot on this guy, unfortunately. Managed to take that quartering shot, and as you can see, he doesn't go very far at all before he actually drops. I do prefer getting the bullet cam instant drops, but thankfully he didn't actually go too far, and he did leave a blood trail if I'd needed to follow that, but thankfully he went down easily within sight. This guy is really massive though, taking a look at him on the ground. He has so much mass and some really long tines. He's just incredible looking. A really impressive buck. I really love the size of his bases. They are just absolutely huge. Like, that is so much mass. Now, he scores 188.529, so lower than what the hunting guest said, but still an impressive record book buck. Really cool to see. Now, moving on to the next buck, and we have another record book buck, actually with the same hunting guess value of 195, but this guy is an 11-point non-typical. Now, you can see he has a typical frame, but he actually has a non-typical point on that left side antler as you're looking at him, just below the brow tine. And it's just so cool to me that you can just have like 1 or 2 non-typical points on a deer and it will actually count them as a non-typical. They don't have to be completely wild, massive looking non-tips. They can just have subtle little like non-typical points. And I think that's just really cool. And seeing variation like this in an older hunting game makes me wish that more of the modern hunting games had stuff like this. This is such a cool detail to see because it means you're going to end up with just more and more unique deer. And, you know, like I said, this might be an older hunting game, but it's definitely got some features and things about it that hold it up even to this day. And I have honestly found it quite addictive so far. And you can see that point is actually quite a decent sized non-typical point. It's like a big hook under that brow. Really cool to see. Now this guy actually scores above that hunting guess and scores 202.445. That was my biggest whitetail at this point, and he was just so impressive. Really cool to actually see. Now moving on to the next buck, and we have another record book non-typical, this time a 12 point with a couple of split tines and double drop tines. This guy looks so cool. And he's not, you know, the biggest that non-tips can get in this game, and he looks absolutely amazing. He's got an estimate of 189, and he's just so cool looking. Like, that is such a cool looking deer. That is awesome. I was so excited when I saw this guy, because he's amazing. I absolutely love this game, and the more and more deer that I see, the more I fall in love with it. Managed to get the drop shot on this guy as well, and you can see he falls nicely right where we shot him. Absolutely fantastic. I was just so excited to see this deer. He's awesome, and for him to be a record book buck as well, that's just extra cool. Now, just going through the grass here, and you can see those big drop tines, or the one big drop tine, as unfortunately the other antler is clipping through the ground. But it's really impressive. The antlers on this guy are super, super cool. Really different to the other non-typical, and that's like what I was saying. So many variants with these racks in this game. It's fantastic. This guy scores 185.350, so very, very close to that hunting gas. And yeah, just a really, really cool record book buck. Now, moving on to the next buck, and we have a estimated 170 value record book whitetail buck with some really tall tines. He doesn't have many tines, but the ones that he does have are just super tall. And as I was watching this buck, something really cool happened. So you can see we're in amongst some trees here, and he actually starts rubbing on a tree. This is so, so cool to see. And I was trying to get like a good look, so excuse me moving from side to side, but the movement isn't exactly very precise in this game, so trying to get the clearest look was a bit difficult. But that is just fantastic. Like, why do we not have this in modern hunting games? And him actually scraping the ground with his hoof as well. That is just so, so cool. I was absolutely so thrilled about seeing that. Like, seeing a record book buck making a scrape, that's amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Like I said, this is an older hunting game, obviously, but it really does have some stuff over some of the newer hunting games, and I think that's why I'm enjoying it so much. This is a really cool looking deer as well. Like I said, not a lot of tines, but the couple of tines that he does have are just super, super tall, except for those tiny little ones towards the end of the main beam, and it ends up being a really unique looking deer once again. Again, completely different from the other record book bucks that we've had so far in this video. Now, I was interested on what this guy was going to score because, like I said, obviously he doesn't have a lot of points, just some really long ones aside from the couple of short ones on the ends of the main beam. But he might be one of the smaller record book bucks that we've had, but again, this is just a different and cool looking deer. He's got some really nice mass on those bases and on those brow tines too. And with all of that going on, he's a really impressive looking deer in his own right. He actually scores 175.144, so a little bit above that hunting guess. And again, just a really cool buck to end up coming across. Now, moving on to the next deer, and this guy is wild. He is a 182 estimate record book buck, but he has such a big frame. Like, in contrast to the previous buck that had a smaller frame and really long tines, we have this guy that has some really long tines and a super wide frame, which, as he tilts his head around, it looks so impressive. Like, he is just so wide. When I spotted this guy in the distance, I was like, is that going to be a world record or something? Because that looks absolutely massive. But he's not even really that close to being a world record typical in this game, which I believe is 200 for the typicals. And he's just so, like, look, as he runs away, how wide he is. That is just insane looking. A deer like that in real life would be just incredible. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get the drop shot on this guy, but he is actually going down, I could see, just as he runs out of render there. So I knew if I ran in that direction, he should be pretty easy to find in the open field out here. And sure enough, he was led out in the open, so really easy to actually locate this guy. That shot was, unfortunately, a little far back, but it did the job and brought him down, so that's all that matters. And he is just, like I said, wild. If he had more points, I'm sure this guy would be, like, world record potential. I think his frame is, like, world record level, but he just doesn't have the number of tines, I think, to make it there. With some more tines, I'm pretty confident this guy would be, you know, close to it, if not world record. He ends up scoring 186.958, so again, a little bit above that hunting guess. The hunting guess I've found tends to be quite close, but some of these obviously have had quite a bit of a difference between the hunting guess and what they've actually scored. Now, we have another record book buck out in front of us for this next clip with an estimate of 171, but he looks pretty similar to the 175 with the really tall tines that we took in a previous clip. He has pretty much the same frame with those really tall second and third tines and then the really short tines at the end of his main beams. So I was curious how close this guy would score to that other buck. Now, I was pretty happy with this shot. I thought I would be able to make a pretty decent shot. Now, he didn't drop immediately, and I couldn't initially actually see where he went. Managed to find him through the scope, and then he kind of just disappeared, and I was watching, trying to see where he was going to end up, but I just couldn't see him. And what he actually did was something I wasn't really expecting. Now, as I walked over and found the blood, I worked out he'd actually ran and died in the water, which I didn't know that they could do. I knew that they could enter the water, but I didn't know that they could actually die in the water. I know that you're not actually supposed to shoot a deer whilst it's swimming around in the water. I believe that sort of counts as poaching within the game, and it will basically forfeit your session. But just interesting to have him end up dying in the water. He scores 170.736, so not far off of that hunting guess, and a little bit smaller than the previous 170s buck that we had earlier. Now, this time, once again, we have an absolutely monstrous looking buck out in front of us here in this field, but he doesn't have a very high estimate. He only has an estimate of 174 for the value, which is really interesting because I thought this guy was going to be a lot bigger than that, and it's really cool. He has that split tine as well. He looks fantastic. Just such a cool deer. The absolute size of him is just amazing. Now, once again, I feel like this is a buck that if he had more tines with that frame would be a lot higher scoring. Because, again, that frame is just so wide and so impressive. And he's got a lot of mass as we take a closer look at him as well. His tines aren't maybe the tallest compared to some of the other bucks we've seen, but he's really impressive. This is a really amazing looking buck as he is. So I can only imagine what this frame would look like with some more tines. It must be seriously impressive. He scores 178.576, so a bit above that hunting guess, which doesn't surprise me because he did look so big, but just a very, very cool looking buck once again. Now, moving on, we have another record book buck. This guy has an estimate of 172 for the value, and he's just a really nice looking buck. Just a very nice frame with some decent length tines. Just more of a classic looking good size whitetail in my opinion. He hasn't got a super massive frame or super long tines, but everything looks pretty good. Now once again, didn't get the drop shot on him, but he is actually going to go down. From what I've read, if they run and they have their tail down, they will end up slowing down and then actually eventually dropping. But if they run away and they have their tail up, then they won't drop. Now, if that's wrong, please feel to correct me, but I have been trying to do, some research and reading on this game, and that's what I have read. So I was pretty confident he was going to go down, and sure enough, he did go down. Looking at that shot, I was pretty happy with it, but it was probably just a little bit high. But just looking at him, kind of similar frame to the 170s bucks that we had earlier, but he does have that tine towards the end of the main beam being quite a bit longer than those bucks had, and just overall a nice frame with nice spread, decent length tines, and decent mass, and he ends up scoring 179.446, which again doesn't surprise me compared to those other 170s bucks that we had. He did have those sort of longer tines at the end of his main beams, like I said. But finally, I ended up finding this guy. A 12-point non-typical estimate of 214 world record buck. I just couldn't believe it when I spotted this guy and I saw the words world record pop up. I knew that was a thing if you come across a world record deer that it would say it in the hunting guess, but I just didn't expect it. This guy is awesome. Obviously, you can see he has the drop tine, but he also has a smaller drop tine on that same side where it's just sort of starting to grow. This guy looks amazing. He has a really nice frame, really long tines. Just everything about him is absolutely awesome looking. I really, really love how this deer looks. And I was just sort of working out how I was going to get around the fence to get a shot on him, because I didn't know if the fence actually had a hitbox, and I didn't want to risk that. When he ends up, of his own accord, just trotting in through the gap in the fence and into the field up alongside me. Like, really close. So I took that shot there, wasn't going to waste too much time, and thankfully we do get him dropping on the spot. That was just nuts for him to just trot in like that. I didn't call or anything. I was literally beginning to crouch walk, thinking, how am I going to get around this fence without spooking him? Because I don't want to risk hitting that fence if it does have a hitbox, which it wouldn't surprise me if it did. And I didn't want to spook him and then end up losing him. And then he just was like, oh, I'll just come to you, and just trotted in through that gap in the fence, like literally to within, I think it was like 40 meters or something the shot ended up being, and just chilling there. I just couldn't believe it. For him to do that was just so perfect. Unfortunately, there's some grass in front of his antlers, but you can see he's just got such a nice set of antlers. The mass, the tines, everything just looks super good. And unfortunately, the side with the drop tine and everything is actually under the ground, but we'll get a good look at him in the actual lodge in a moment. But just an amazing deer. And I was so curious as to what he was actually going to score. My first world record buck here in Deer Hunter 2005. He scores 212.287. That is so, so cool. I think that's going to be the goal now for me, is to get a world record of each of the different species in this game, because that was such a thrilling experience. Seeing that world record pop up was amazing. I love seeing all the record bucks and the different antlers and stuff they can have. It's really cool, and I just find that so exciting, like what you can come across. And then, like I said, you get to see the behaviour and stuff as well, which it just makes it so, so cool. And then you get a deer pop up and it has world record in its hunting guess, and it was really thrilling. It was so, so exciting. And I just went into full panic mode. I was like, that's a world record deer. That's what we're looking for. So yeah, I really do think that is going to be the goal, to try and go through and get world record for axis deer, mule deer, for the blacktail, for the roe deer, and possibly just several for each, you know, because now I've got a world record whitetail. I'd love to see more. Like, I'd love to get a world record typical as well, and I know that the non-typicals can get bigger than this, so I'm just curious, and I want to see the biggest deer that I can possibly find in this game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, because I think there's definitely going to be quite a few more to come. But that is going to be it for this video, so thank you so, so much for watching and for all your support as always, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.